Hi, Kelsey.
Hi, Brooks.
How are you today?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you?
Good, good. I'm good.
Good.
I'm hanging out with you. I'm very happy. One of the things that we have been talking about a lot with clients is this idea of a tightrope. And that's a metaphor for us to explain what we've been seeing in culture, which is the creator economy is stronger and better than ever. If you would imagine the creator economy as like a skyline, the buildings are taller than they've ever been. And there are these companies that are walking a tightrope between those buildings trying to get that like incredible, unbelievable view, which is what we think of as like ROI, consideration, brand love, brand trust, all the things that you would want as a brand. But because those buildings are so high, the fall can feel deadly.
Yeah.
It's precarious up there. So I'm just curious on, do you feel like it's more stressful to be an influencer these days?
Oh, yeah. And that analogy is like perfectly describes how it feels, right? It feels as if your one video, if your foot slips off or one video is off from your brand, you might lose all of your brand partnerships, or you might not see a return on the investment, or the brand might be like, we didn't even get the return we expected.
Yeah.
So I think that when I think about that, it's one, not to be negative, you're gonna slip, right? Like you're gonna,
it's true,
you're gonna slip up. At some point in time, you're probably going to make a decision like everybody does in their career that takes them on a different path than they expect and didn't quite get the positive result that they wanted. And so that's why I keep stressing it. I stress the values of knowing your values and realizing that if your values caused you to slip, is that a value that you want to hold on to, or is it a value you're willing to shift? Also going back to the fact that transparency, like we were talking about, being transparent when you make a mistake, being transparent when maybe a certain value overtook another value and you decided to go down that path and see where it takes you. The last thing that I keep saying is long-term partnership, I think, is a great way to walk that tightrope, but to almost have a safety net when you fall off of it. It's okay, you know what, this video didn't really work and the video, you posted after it, we didn't like, but we still have 3 videos that we have to make. So can we relook at this contract and maybe think about, if you want to talk about this thing you feel so passionate about, can you wait 4 weeks after we ask you to post our video? So that's what I say, is that focus on the values, be transparent if you mess up, and also provide yourself as an influencer and brand safety net if it doesn't go as planned.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of brands are hesitant to go to the dark place.
Yes.
And to really make some tried and true plans on what happens in a crisis. What happens if someone says X, Y, or Z? What happens if we say X, Y, or Z?
Exactly.
Will our influencers still want to work with us? I think ensuring that you really do have a plan of action can help you in those moments of feeling like you're going to fall off the tightrope.
Yeah.
The big gulp when you look down. Suddenly you're not in reactive mode, you're actually in action mode, and you can really move from a place of your own value system instead of feeling like you're at the will of what's happening in culture. We spend a lot of time and money as marketers trying to make brands feel human. We give them mascots and we give them voiceovers and we give them like casted family and friends and homes. But I think what's so cool about influencers is that they already are humans.
Yeah.
You're an influencer, you have a family, you have a background, you have a hometown, you have favorite foods, all those things, and that's what makes people feel really connected to an influencer, connected to you.
Yeah.
But also, influencers are human beings, and human beings mess up.
Yeah, we do. We do.
And an influencer does that at scale. So it's hard to kind of navigate that amazing superpower and that also huge liability. I'd love to hear, how do you handle being a human online?
Carefully. I handle it very carefully.
Like with a lawyer.
Yeah, but I do think that's so real. Like, influencers are human. And I also think a lot of times influencers that people are working with are like below 30 years old, which is really young. Really young. And when you are going through a lot of ebbs and flows of life, like I've noticed that some of the biggest influencers are at that age where for the first time, you are creating your own value system. You are realizing what you want. And at the same time, that value system and personality is being merged with the brands you're working with. So you will in 5 years not believe what you thought you believed. And that's normal. That's actually a good thing. That's
called growing up.
Yeah, that's a really good thing in humanity, is that the things that I thought 5 years ago are not the things, and I hope 20 years in the future, I don't think the exact way that I think now. So that's why I think that it's so important to remember that influencers are human. I think that that is why people also love them, is because they kind of forcefully have to put their mistakes on display. You know, if they're working with a brand and it doesn't go well, their audience is going to expect them to talk about it and face it. And that's why I really encourage brands and influencers to look at partnership as something as long-term as you can versus just 1 or 2 videos out the can, which sometimes that's work. It is what it is. But, you know, how can you make this long-term to make sure that as you're growing, the brand is growing with you and you all are kind of like nourishing each other.
Yeah, and I think there's a responsibility for brands to recognize that superpower, that being human is really important and special.
Yes.
And to create an ecosystem of relationships so that they protect that humanity, but also expect it and expect someone to sound off on a war that maybe feels really, really specific to them, or something that's happening in culture or in media that feels really specific to them, and allowing for that humanity, but also kind of establishing their own game plan of what is too much, what is outside of our value system, what is not my permission space and I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and doing kind of the prep work to make sure that they're finding people that kind of fit within their own value system, and that everyone is going to be on the same team.
Yeah, and I think it's also the responsibility of an influencer to think that way too. Like, right, you might feel very, very passionately about something, but is it in line with your brand to go on the internet and talk about that? Is it good for you to go on the internet and talk about that? So I think it is the responsibility of a brand, but also of an influencer, consistently think you might be passionate about many things, but you don't always bring what you're passionate about into work. Sometimes that lives in different spaces.
One of our rules of the rope is before you ask, who are you? Ask, who am I?
Introspection.
Trying to be introspective over here. What does that mean to you?
To me, it sounds like remembering those values, right? Like, what are our values as a brand? What do we want to represent? And also, are those values within like the current permission space right now? And also, it sounds like too, like really doing climate checks, right? Like the values are the values, but does what's going on culturally, does that mean our permission space needs to change? But does that change to align with our values? So it sounds like both of those talking back to each other.
Yeah, and one of the things that we try to do here at Edelman is really hone in on those values through 2 things. We like to do playbooks development, and we do that cross-functionally across a bunch of different teams here in the building, but really trying to get granular on like, what are your thoughts about religion, politics, family, humor, all of the things, so that they can get really, really specific on how they feel, because once you really land those values, everything else flows out really easily from there.
Absolutely.
And we're also trying to figure out a way to audit brands. We've had feedback from a lot of influencers that they do a lot of research before they work with a brand, which I think is an amazing best practice.
Totally.
How can brands get research on themselves to see how they're doing, where they need help, where they need more space, where they don't have a permission space? And I think we can help brands really figure out the spaces in which they can play and ones that need a little bit more work.
I love that.
Another one of our rules for this tightrope and how to navigate it is set up for success. What does that mean to you?
I think about the idea of like actually doing your research on who you're working with, right? If you need a successful collaboration, a successful partnership, you need to know that the work that the person you're working with, you need to see the work that they've done before. Probably want to know a little bit about their personality in meetings, asking around. It sounds like vetting to me, in all honesty, of the people you're working with and making sure that they align with the brand.
Yeah, we see that past behavior is such a good indicator of future behavior.
Totally.
And if you get really granular on vetting influencers according to the criteria that makes sense for your brand and your values and all those good things, you are going to have a much more successful collaboration.
I could see that.
One of our rules of the tightrope is to stay fluent in culture. What does that mean to you?
It sounds like you need to keep up. Like, keep on your toes. You need to know what's going on in the world. You need to know how culture's shifting. You need to know how values are shifting, how people's opinions are shifting. And also, it sounds like keeping up with whatever side of the spectrum might be on both sides, right? Like, what are the people that might align with your brand saying, and then what are the people who don't align with your brand saying about this social issue that's going on?
There's a lot of nuance, and social moves really quickly. I'm really glad that Edelman has a ton of tools that helps clients with this. We have the Gen Z lab, so we understand generationally with Gen Z what's going on. Same with longevity lab. We have specialists in politics and global affairs. We have specialists in influencer. We have specialists in social who know exactly what's trending and how and where and why. And they're the type of people and the type of tools that'll make sure that you don't miss something, and especially that you don't miss something that is nuanced and difficult and moving at the speed of culture.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure.
An influencer campaign is two brands coming together. What does that mean to you?
It sounds like treat it like a business.
Yeah.
Like to treat the influencer like the owner of the business that they do own.
Yes.
And I also think that goes back to your point of vetting. If you want to do that, you probably need to work with influencers who are vetted properly. And you
Yes.
actually treat their campaigns and collaborations and their meetings with you as if they were running a business.
Yeah.
So I would say they all go hand in hand, but setting the stage that we are literally bringing another company in here to
You
work
are a CEO.
with. Exactly.
You're
Literally.
a small business owner.
Yes, yes.
So I mean, I'm grateful that we have amazing legal affairs and business affairs people to give this fellow CEO and business
Thank
owner a really great contract
Yeah.
that is legally sound.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's going to work for you and your lawyer.
Absolutely.
We also have influencer specialists in-house who have years, almost decades of experience and understand the ins and outs of how these campaigns come to life. This is truly a business collaboration. And I think it's really at its best when both parties treat it that way.
I agree. I completely agree.
That's all I got.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
Oh.
You guys, I love this.
Amazing.